Good afternoon, my name is Tom. I'm a fourth year's honours student at the Conservatorium and I'm researching the use of music as a means of emotional regulation in HSC students. It is my pleasure to introduce Keppie Coutts, who is a teacher at the Australian Institute of Music and the Berklee College of Music Online and JMC Academy. Keppie studied at Berklee College of Music and she will be talking to us about the psychology and lyric writing. Please make her feel welcome.
Does everyone have a piece of paper and a pen or pencil? Yes? Does anyone not? Just raise your, okay. So another couple of seconds, all right. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do to just jump into this is do a quick memory experiment. So for this you do not need the pen and paper. I just want you to lay them down on your lap. What I'm going to do is read out a list of words to you, and your job is to remember as many of the words as possible, okay? So it's not an impossibly large list. That's not the point of this exercise. It's just a list of words. Just try and remember as many as you can, okay? So here we go. Tomato, idea, fireworks, task, train tracks, approach, koala, touch, distance, cinnamon, process, opera house. Okay, now I want you to write your name at the top of the piece of paper. Now that you've written your name, I want you to write down as many of the words as you can remember. It's usually at this point that people slow down, and I can kind of guarantee that if you can't remember anymore at this point, they're not just going to magically come back, they're gone. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to show you two lists, all right? List 1 and list 2. They contain all the words I read to you. I just want you to count up in your own list. Did you remember more from list 1 or list 2? Okay, so go through, you might even write a little 1 next to any of the 1s and a 2 next to any of the 2s, and then count up. Did you remember more 1s or did you remember more 2s? Okay, so I'll just give you a couple of seconds to do that. Yeah. Negative points if you made words up. Okay, has everyone counted? So here, now, I want you to raise your hand if you remembered more from list 1. Okay, look around the room. All of you look around the room. Put your hands down. Raise your hand if you remembered more from list 2. Hands down. And if you remembered an equal number from both lists. Okay, so you people are irrelevant to my statistics. The most important thing that happens universally every single time I do this is the vast majority of people will remember more words from list 1 than list 2. Now, this is not an effect of ordering, for example, right? Like I didn't order the words in such a way that you would remember them more this way or that way. The only difference between these two sets of words is the type of language that they are, right? And so what is the difference? Can anyone kind of isolate a key difference in the type of language? Yeah.
This one, there's all the images.
Right, spot on. Okay, and so what is the difference? Okay, list 1, images. Not only the images, they are sensory, right? They actually call in different senses. And they're specific, which is related to image, right? Which is to say that the word happens and something specific appears in your visual scratch pad in your brain, right? So as per this, like tomato, cinnamon, train tracks, opera house, right? It all just like bursts into your mental cinema, okay? Whereas list 2 are concepts, they are abstract and they are general, right? It would take more effort for you and require a lot more time for you to actually attach some kind of image to it, right? But as soon as I read the word, there's nothing that immediately springs to mind. And this is one of the most fundamental differences in types of language that affect both memory and emotion and are extremely relevant to lyric writing and strategies for effective lyric writing, which is really what I kind of teach and love to teach and love to help people improve at. So it turns out that the way that we process language and different types of language have differential effects on memory, as we just experienced, but there's also a relationship between memory and emotion. The actual relationships between those things are way too complex for 10 minutes, okay? But for the purposes of encountering students who are songwriters or lyric writers, I think that there are some important takeaways, okay? The first takeaway is simply that imagery is easier to remember. It appears in our brains in a much more direct and immediate way. And then the next kind of step in that is that what is remembered is more liked. And that's to say, memory has an effect on emotion, type of language has an effect on emotion. And this is really important in lyric writing. And this is kind of a funny psychological effect that the Nobel Prize winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls cognitive ease, which just out of interest is a mental heuristic or a mental shortcut that humans make. And some people describe it as kind of a slight like faulty wiring in the brain, but it's actually very adaptive, right? So there's actually evolutionary reasons why we tend to like things more that we are more familiar with. So things that we remember more easily, we tend to like more, even though the relationship between those two things, it doesn't make sense necessarily that we should just like something because we're more familiar with it, right? But it just turns out to be true almost all the time in lots of different domains, and lyrics tend to be similar as well, right? So things that are more easy for us to process and appear as specific images just are processed differently by the human brain. So let's have an example of this so you can really see this in practice. So this is a lyric to a song called The Bed Song by Amanda Palmer. This is the first verse. And it goes, Exhibit A, we are friends in a sleeping bag, splitting the heat. We have one filthy pillow to share, and your lips are in my hair. Someone upstairs has a rap that we laughed at, and people are drinking and singing about Scarborough Fair on a ukulele dare. So the type of language here is dripping in specificity, right? And not only is it extremely specific and image bound, but the emotion is vivid. Even though we're not told what the emotion is, there is a vivid emotional reaction that we have to this scenario. Let's compare this to a lyric where we kind of strip away some of that specificity, okay? Exhibit A, we are friends sitting together. It's cold outside, so we have to share the heat. And you're sitting so close to me. Someone upstairs tells a joke that we laughed at, and people are having a good time and singing a song. Someone is playing along. So it's not to say that this example is devoid of imagery, right? It's simply the case that the first example with something like your lips are in my hair, on a spectrum of type of language, it's really specific, really detailed, really sensory. The equivalent example of something like you're sitting so close to me, it is an image, but we've pushed it towards the other end, right? It's something that's a little bit more general, and hopefully you felt the difference in those two lyrics, right? That the first one, the specificity of the imagery equated to a vividness of emotion that was lacking in the second example. So great songwriters in history know this intuitively, and I think it's really important to listen to some of the wisdom of wonderful songwriters. So Leonard Cohen on this subject, for example, when interviewed, the interviewer said, "You once said that the most particular answer is the most universal one." And Leonard Cohen said, "I think so. I think that's the advice that a lot of good writers have given me and the world. You don't really want to say the tree, you want to say the sycamore. We seem to be able to relate to detail. We seem to have an appetite for it. It seems our days are made of details, and if you can get a sense of another person's day in details, your own day of details is summoned in your mind in some way other than just a general line like the days went by." So I think that he has summed up the effect of specific and image-bound details as opposed to kind of more general abstract ones. So the key takeaway points that I would love to leave you with, first are that specific sensory details make a lyric more relatable, not less relatable. And this is actually kind of a paradox in lyric writing if you think about it. And the takeaway here is actually the more specific something is, the more universal it is, not the other way around. Secondly, if you ever encounter songwriters or lyric writing students, encouraging songwriting students to transform their ideas into specific sensory detail will transform their songs into better songs. And finally, using the memory experiment is a really effective and immediate way to demonstrate the difference in two types of language. So that's it for me, and I just really hope that this short little 10 minutes has shown you that you don't actually need to be a songwriter or a lyric writer to take some really basic piece of information and help songwriters and songwriting students transform lines and sections into more detailed, more specific, and therefore more emotional and relatable lyrics. So thank you guys very much.